My name is Meg, and Cherie and I first met back in January of this year, so not that long ago, out in California. We were both attending a women's retreat called the Southern Sierra Goddess Gathering, and Cherie was actually a presenter, and I was headed there as a supporter for the retreat. One of my very good friends was hosting the retreat and had been planning the retreat all year. And she also was very close with Cherie. So she kind of connected us, and it was quite a draw of fate. Cherie was supposed to get into San Diego about like 3 hours ahead of me. So she was supposed to have been picked up, brought to her house, brought to the house that we were staying at. And then I was going to come in later and meet them by train. And it just so happened that her flight was delayed, and she ended up getting in right around the same time as me. And we actually had about an hour and a half, like a couple hours to wait for our friends to come pick us up at the airport. So we just immediately clicked and had time to connect. And just right off the bat, you know, it was just amazing to like meet her and trust her and start to get a connection going from then on out. And yeah, so that's how we met and basically started working together that same weekend. So it was definitely a fated meeting. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll start. I started having a lot of like the experience of consciousness around something being very terribly wrong. As kind of an older teenager, I would say maybe like around age 16 or 17, I started developing a lot of I developed an eating disorder. I was going through a lot of really challenging issues within my family. And from there, it just progressed into a lot of drinking, just a lot of tendencies of addiction, I guess, drinking, drugs, for the majority of my like college years and into my early 20s. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, my body started just kind of breaking down. I broke out with cystic acne all over my face, my back, which I had never had any skin problems ever before in my life. I was dealing with like eczema and psoriasis type kind of lesions on my skin. I dropped like a ton of weight out of nowhere, and I was getting panic attacks. So things just kind of kept building over the course of about 10 years in my young adult life. And I had no idea like that wasn't normal. And that the way that I was living was just like, I had no idea that wasn't how I was meant to feel and be living in the world, essentially. And so I started this kind of soul searching, changing the way I was living my life, at least trying to stop drinking so much, at least looking at my daily habits and things that I could try to change consciously. I got really into yoga at that point in my life as well, about 5 years ago. And yet there was always something like under the surface. There was always something there that I just like couldn't get to. And I've done work with standard talk therapists, to Reiki masters, to EFT, to working with essential oils, working with meditation and yoga, working with Ayurvedic consultations, different breath work. Like I've done so much different styles of healing to try to get to the root of really what was causing all this like anxiety and just like underlying feelings of being like overwhelmed in the world. And so getting to this work with Cherie then helped me get to the root of the problem, that I actually experienced a number of times of sexual abuse as a child. And it wasn't in my conscious memory. So all of this was just underlying all of my behaviors, the way that I was seeing the world, in a way that I couldn't access it and I couldn't touch it. And despite like trying to peel back all the layers with all of these other healing works that I've done, I just like couldn't get to that one piece. I knew that something was there, and I couldn't touch it until I started working with Cherie, and all of a sudden it was like everything made sense. Like everything from my past, all of the choices, the bad choices that I've made, the choices that I didn't feel were even a choice, just like what had happened to me, and all of my health issues, the constant anxiety, sleep trouble, like everything just made sense. And it's through this work with her that I've been able to really pull that root out of the ground and now start fresh. Absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, Cherie and I actually started our initial work together at this conference in San Diego, at this women's retreat. So the minute I met Cherie and she started telling me about all this work that she does with PTSD, there was like this little, it was just like a feeling, like an intuitive ding of like, I feel like this is the woman that's going to help me get to the root of everything, that I've been like knowing that there's something there and not able to touch it. Like this is who I'm like meant to meet to help me do that. So immediately in meeting her, there was this like instant level of trust, and I was ready to go there. And I think there was a bit of apprehension from more of my logical reasoning self, especially hearing some of the techniques that we use in terms of like going, kind of time traveling or going back into these loops of trauma, and not really I wasn't really sure of what that would entail, or like how I would feel going through that experience. But I knew that I also had to try something completely different than I've ever tried, because nothing else has worked. So I think I was in a very receptive place. And that's also what enabled me to really dive in very quickly when we started this work. So essentially, I went to Cherie's room. We had a really safe space set up in her hotel room. And I would like to say that this is the one and only time that Cherie and I have actually done this work in person. So every other session that I've done with her has been through video chat or over the phone. This is the one session that we actually got to do in person, but I do feel that in-person session allowed us to build a level of trust going into the subsequent work. And so essentially, she kind of gave me a rundown of how the session would go, and that I would essentially be in almost like a meditative space. We set a sacred, safe space, called in any sort of guides, supporters from alternate realms to really hold a safe place for us. And you know, Cherie made herself known that she was just there for me the whole time. And, you know, whether that was just sitting with me or having a hand on my hand on my shoulder, just knowing that her presence was there with me the whole time, allowed me to let go to where the work could be more effective. So once we get, you know, taking some deep breaths, really relax the body, and from there, you know, it was just like all of a sudden I entered this kind of alternate realm of consciousness within myself. And very quickly, my like 8-year-old self just showed up, and it was like I was in this space with her and I was physically there. I knew where I was, obviously. I knew consciously where I was in the world and my body, but like I felt my whole energy, my whole self, travel into this loop with this young girl that was me, and seeing her so clearly and feeling her presence, and like seeing my backyard that we were in, the house that we were living in at the time. And just like, you know, it's like all my senses were alive in the experience. And I felt myself fully there. And through that integration, as I was in this kind of super conscious space with my 8-year-old self, is, you know, Cherie guided me through a conversation with her. So she gave me questions to ask her, helped me to kind of know what would help this young girl to feel more comfortable in answering the questions, for me to establish trust with this part of myself that had just been locked away for so long. And it was in that very first integration that that I found out like what had happened to me. And I just the minute that I was able to pull her back into my body, we did an exercise to essentially reconnect this missing piece of my energy with my energy now, my adult energy. And as soon as that happened, I cried like I've never cried before. It was like one of the biggest releases, the biggest reliefs I've ever had, to kind of finally know, to not be in this dark place anymore of like, why do I feel so messed up? Like, why can I just not operate in the world? Why can't I get over this? And all of a sudden everything was made so clear, and yet it also hurt. And I felt a lot of pain, and I felt a lot of sadness for that as well. And so I think these tears were all wrapped up in a sense of relief and release and sadness and anger. And then I was just there again. I was in my body. I was in the room with Cherie, and she was holding me, and I was able to let go of something in that one instant, that one moment, that I had been holding on to for like 20 years. So, and I would say just about every subsequent meeting after that kind of went that way for a couple of months. But just even in that first experience, I felt this huge weight off of my chest, and just this ability to actually know what had happened finally, and to be in a place of getting to move forward instead of acting from that past space. And all that happened in just one go. And we were able to go into another bubble. I was able to do about, in that same session with her, we went back in I was able to touch base with my 12-year-old self as well, reintegrate her. And all of this took about maybe like an hour, a little over an hour to go through all of this. And then after that, I was very tired. A lot. I was tired and raw and open and very vulnerable and super unsure of like how to process everything that had just come up. And I would say that was the most challenging part, was not really the apprehension around what's going to come up, the apprehension of, okay, this comes up, now what do I do? Like, what do I do with this information that I just received that I haven't remembered for 20 plus years? How do I actually move forward now that I know this? And that was the hardest part. It was actually stepping up after that. It took me a few weeks to really reach out to Cherie and be willing to move forward from it, because I was in a place of denial, and I think that's very normal. So, and Cherie helped me to know that as well, that it was normal to feel that denial and to be really unsure of the memories that were coming back, and to know that it's okay and we can take as much time as needed to feel comfortable in moving forward. I would say if I was at like a 9 or 10 in terms of emotional distress, I'm probably at more of like a 2 overall. I have my days, like we all do, but as now I'm fully like reintegrated, and now I'm in a place of like just allowing some emotions to be there and to move forward with them in a healthy way, and learning how I want to establish a new relationship with my parents and my family moving forward. And so there are still some things to be figured out, and yet at the same time, I don't feel in distress about them. It's like, okay, I have Cherie, and I'm so grateful for her support through the whole process. And even now, I'm grateful that I can chat with her. But it's like, even just a few months ago, I was talking to Cherie like 3 times a week, 2 to 3 times a week, needing her, like needing to talk to her. And now I'd like touch base with her, and I'm like letting her know how things are, and asking her questions that arise. But I'm really feeling a much larger sense of independence and confidence and trust in managing the emotions that arise. So yeah, probably a 2 or a 1. Some days a 1, some days a 2 or a 3, but nowhere near that level of distress that I used to feel on a regular basis. Yeah, so I mean, a lot has happened in the last like 4 months. Cherie and I really just started working together consistently in like February. So we've really only been working together for about 4 months, like 3 months total for like the main like bulk of the work. And then the last couple of months we've been touching base and, tuning in here and there. But the bulk of this like reintegration work was just like 2 to 3 months. And I would say I've noticed most of the shifts really happening over the last like 2.5 months, and just as everything's settling. I used to hate looking in the mirror, and I just like couldn't bear to look at myself. It was like always just judgment and criticism, and like I would like feel depressed like looking at myself in the mirror. And I've come a long way in that regard. I'm finding a lot more self-love than I've ever felt in my life. Considering, you know, the abuse started when I was very young and went until I was a teenager. I've been dealing with a lot of self-hatred like my entire life. So it's very new to start to be in a place of not feeling that, and feeling just softer in my body, and not as like harsh and critical of myself. I'm noticing like a radiance in my skin a lot more. I'm actually digesting food better. Like I've had digestive challenges for years, and all of a sudden I'm digesting foods that I haven't been able to digest well in like 4 or 5 years. So I feel all of like my bodily systems are functioning at a new space. I have a willingness to take care of myself in a new way. There was a time when things were not super bad. Like I was just like functioning. Like I wasn't really anywhere near thriving, or I wasn't just surviving. Like I was like just over that hump, and but I like wasn't taking care of myself. I was like little things, like I like didn't want to brush my teeth, or like I, you know, had always had trouble with like smoking and drinking, and it was just an uphill battle with all of these things. And I finally have like it's just this click. It was like this switch where all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I care about myself. Like I really actually care, and I want to do really good things for myself and my body. And it's like I haven't felt that in a really long time, and it just kind of like has happened. Like it's all of a sudden I'm just noticing that there's this level of care and acceptance that feels really supportive and really empowering, and very feminine, which is super important for me as a woman, to feel empowered in that femininity. I am walking a lot taller. I used to like slouch a lot. I'm very tall anyway, but so that was kind of posture that I learned early on in life. But I've had this like conscious shift of just opening up. And I actually left a job that wasn't paying me well enough and wasn't supporting me and giving me the opportunities that I deserve, with all my gifts and my talents. That happened just a few months ago. And then after I left this job, I got an opportunity to go travel for a couple of months, which is something I've wanted to do for years. So now all of a sudden, like, I feel this momentum of things manifesting in my life, simply because I'm like believing in a self-worth that I've never believed in. So I would say those are some of the like biggest shifts. And then just this like complete wiping away of like the panic and anxiety that I was just constantly operating under for a long time, is gone. Like I have these moments where it kind of pops up again, just because of the emotions that I'm still working through. But in terms of like operating in the world under this constant anxiety, like that's gone. That's like not even here anymore. So yeah. That is an amazing question. I feel that I am honoring more important relationships in my life. Like they're being able to acknowledge those people that are like, oh yeah, this is a true friend. This is someone I love. This is someone I cherish. They're important. Being able to show up better in those relationships, and just being, what's the right word I'm looking for? Just being more present in the important friendships in my life as I'm determining those. And then just having this improving sense of self-worth is also enabling me to shift my relationship with my parents, and go from this place of constantly seeking approval, constantly seeking attention, constantly questioning my own choices and decisions and wanting, their input all the time, and just like this sense of codependency and neediness. I'm shifting into a new sense of independence in which like I am able to stand up for myself in conversations when something's said that's inappropriate. I am able to stand up for my time a lot more. And, instead of kind of letting them walk all over me, it's like, oh, well, I can talk, so you need to talk to me right now. Me being able to honor my own time and my own space more, and saying what works for me, what doesn't work for me. Even these trips that I've taken, I was in a romantic relationship, and it was very difficult, especially integrating some of these memories around sexual abuse. It really hurt our sex life for a few months, and it was very challenging. It really pushed us to the brink, and I got to a point where I was like, I need space. I need to go be on my own. I need to let this integrate. I need to just like kind of be out in the world for a little bit. And yet at the same time, it's opened both of us up to this deeper sense of vulnerability and connection, and put me in a place to share feelings and thoughts that I didn't think I could ever really share with another person, and in a way that's like empowering in that vulnerability. So I feel that in terms, like, the biggest change in my interpersonal relationships is just not being afraid anymore, like not being afraid of being open and really connecting on these deeper levels. Yeah. Well, I guess the first thing I would say is like, what do you have to lose if you've tried everything else, or even if you haven't tried everything else, but you've tried something, you at least maybe tried something. And if you haven't, it hasn't worked, then, what are you going to lose trying something different? And if you haven't tried anything at all, then it's time to try something and to not live with it anymore. Because it just eats you alive. And I certainly, I know that I come from a bit of a different background, having done a lot of energy work prior to this, and been, done different levels of psychotherapy and emotional work. And I was in a space of like being open to it. I get it, and I get that it can, sound kind of scary if you're just unsure of energy work. Right. And yet at the same time, Cherie is one of the most amazing people that I've ever met in my life, and is just a mother and a mentor and a healer and a friend. And she's someone that is certainly worthy of your trust. And there's just nothing to lose by making the choice to try it and giving your whole self to the work and to see what can come out of it. because really that's the only way that something will come out of it. If you give your whole heart and your whole belief and your whole trust into it, and know that you're worth a better life. I guess I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for Cherie. And I'm grateful for my story. And I'm grateful that this happened so that I can heal and help others to not be afraid of doing the same thing. And to know that you're not broken past the point of getting better. And that you can. And well, something that is very new, a new desire, I guess, a new vision for my future that has just come up in the last few months is having a family and having children. And I've been terrified of having children. For the majority of my adult life thus far, I was like, nope, no way. I will not have children. I cannot manage that. I cannot even take care of myself. I can't even think about bringing another life into this world. But I know that fear was all coming from the trauma that I experienced as a child and being afraid of passing that along. And being able to be completely freed and healed of it to move forward, it's like all of a sudden I'm like, I want a family. I want children. I want to pass along this new freedom and not the trauma lineage and not the sexual abuse lineage. And that's one of the most profound desires that has come out of this work, was that I want a child. I can have a child. I want to give them the best life and a free life and be able to have them freed from my trauma as well as a parent. I think that's probably that's the most like profound vision that I have for myself. And I do feel that I'm still considering like what else I want to bring into my life, because it's like I've always been creating these like desires and visions from this scattered place of like not being in wholeness, just, oh, like I think I want to do that, or I think I want to do this or try that and do that, and not really being tuned in to like what actually feels best and most supportive for me. So I'm really excited to be in a place of discovery, of just exploring like, what is it that I really, really want to do for my work? Like, what is the life that I want to lead? How do I want my days to look? How do I want my days to feel? And obviously I know like travel is really important to me as well, hence why I went and traveled for a couple of months to explore that lifestyle. And in the process I've gained a lot of clarity around wanting a deeper level of balance and being able to have like a beautiful, comfortable life, and also be able to travel and explore and get out of my comfort zone at times. And so I would say balance and joy, and lots of love, and eventually a family at some point in my future, whenever that is the right time. And just allowing myself to just revel in the work that I've done for a little while. It feels good to congratulate myself and to be really proud. And I want to soak that in and see where else that can take me, career-wise, interpersonally, educationally, whatever that may be.